Phil Sheridan, ESPN NFL Nation, wrote a very comprehensive piece over at ESPN.com on the Eagles draft picks. And Phil, I want to start with you about Bradford because it seems like every other day, whether it's Roseman or Condon, one of them comes out to the media and throws us a bone on this story. I first wanted to get your reaction on, it seemed like yesterday it was almost planned that both of them were going to be in the media.
Yeah, it did. I mean, everybody got to kind of get their spin out there a little bit, I guess. And both of those guys are veteran spinners. There's no question about that. Condon's been around a long time. He's done this for a long time. And he knows how to play that game. And Roseman, if he's as good at being a GM and picking players in the draft as he is at working that angle, the Eagles will be okay. So yeah, not surprising. Both will try to get their side out. Clearly they got a couple of weeks here before Bradford could change his mind and decide to come back. For the voluntary workouts that go on later this month. So this is kind of everybody getting a chance to kind of plead their case in public, see how the chips fall. Bradford may have made a statement trying to work a trade before the draft, but once the draft was over, and especially once Denver moved up to the first round to take Paxton Lynch, there's not a whole lot of teams that are going to give you anything if you're the Eagles for Sam Bradford at this point. So his decision is basically to just be disruptive and kind of throw a little bit of a tantrum, if you will, or just come in, suck it up and just try to play better. If he does that and takes his team to the playoffs this year, he will either be the quarterback here or somewhere next year. At this point, he's only hurting himself, I think. So, I think it'll all shake out relatively soon, and I don't think it'll be a major deal going forward.
Phil, I believe, like you just said, he's hurting himself. I believe Bradford is sabotaging the rest of his NFL career right now by taking this position and letting Tom Condon speak for him. Do you think that this is something where the agent told Sam, listen, Sam, sit back, I'll do the talking? Or did the agent go to him and maybe give him this game plan here?
I think it's probably a combination. I mean, I think Bradford expresses his frustration to the agent, and the agent, he's dealt with these kind of things before. I mean, seen other people do it. So the agent kind of gives him his options. You can play along, go in and be the guy that they want you to be, or you can look out for your best interest and try to make a statement right now. But once they made that decision to hold out and not go to camps and stuff like that, I do believe that Bradford is of all the NFL quarterbacks I've covered over my career. This goes back to Jaworski and Randall Cunningham back in the mid '80s. I've never met a guy that was sort of, I don't know, just more disinterested or withdrawn from the whole media process. I mean, Sam Bradford, he'll do a weekly press conference and he answers questions and he's just fine. He's a bright guy and he answers, pretty honestly, or at least it seems honestly. But he's got no social media presence. When his off season, comes to an end, he goes to Oklahoma and stays on his property there, and you don't hear from him again until it's necessary. He's not a guy that goes to the Super Bowl and does Radio Row and talks to people. He's just not interested in all that. He got a ton of money when he got drafted, and he's got all the money he'll ever need, and he wants to play football, but the rest of it is just not that interesting to him, and he doesn't consent to do like big sit-down interviews with people. He's just not interested in his image or anything like that. So I have a feeling that once they decided on this course of action, then Bradford was just fine having the agent kind of take the lead as far as dealing with the media and all this stuff. And it's not his nature to do it. Now, whether he's well served by that and having Condon said the kind of things that he's been saying that perhaps cast Sam in a bad light, and that's another issue. But I think that's just a natural outgrowth of Sam's personality is all. He just does not want to play this game, and that's what he pays his agent to do, and that's what his agent is doing.
Based on the picture that you just drew, Phil, to me that sounds like that Sam Bradford is an introvert. Is that fair for me to assume?
I think he's a little bit. I mean, so he's a quieter guy, basically. And one of the things the Eagles players made a point of last year was saying that in the second half of the year, he really kind of came out of his shell a little bit. He kind of was addressing the team and pregame, and he was more of a leader and taking more of that kind of a role. He felt more comfortable. I just think, I don't think he's not to a degree where it's a problem for him as a quarterback, but I think that when it comes to the other stuff, with dealing with the media, kind of the attention and all that stuff, he just doesn't want any part of it, and he's not interested in it. And when he got engaged recently, I guess TMZ reported it first, and I was trying to track down, just to get confirmation of it, because I didn't want to just echo a TMZ report without at least trying to get the facts right.
Sure, absolutely.
And but Bradford wouldn't. He wouldn't even let the Eagles. He wouldn't even answer the Eagles PR staff, and they're asking him a question about something as innocuous as a guy getting engaged. And when he came back from minicamp, he talked about it. He wasn't like hiding it or anything, but he doesn't want any part of that aspect of the game. He's not interested in the media. He's not going to do. You don't see him doing commercials. You don't see him doing any of that extra stuff. He's just not wired that way. So I don't think it hurts him in terms of how he interacts with his teammates. But I do think he's just very very private and a kind of quiet guy in other ways.
We're talking with Phil Sheridan, ESPN NFL Nation Eagles insider here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out here until 6. Phil, I wanted to ask you, so we know what Howie said, we know what Condon said. How are we going to be able to kiss and make up in this relationship? Or, as Sal Palantonio says, are we just not being able to put the toothpaste back in the toothpaste tube here?
Yeah, it's hard. The Eagles are, they're kind of saying what I think are the right things to say in terms of, giving Bradford the opportunity to kind of come back and be the team leader. I think in the locker room, it gets a little interesting. I think players understand there's a business side of all this, and that kind of all gets taken care of in the offseason normally. And once the team actually gets together and reports to camps and stuff like that, then it's about football. It's about team building. It's about guys kind of forming chemistry and all that kind of stuff. So I think if Bradford misses all of that in May, that won't help him. It was interesting to me that Zach Ertz is one of the guys has kind of talked Bradford up the most in the last few months, along with Jordan Matthews, I think. And Ertz and Matthews went out to Oklahoma. They visited Bradford out there and worked out with him. And they were talking very, enthusiastically about having Bradford as their quarterback this year. But the other day when Carson Wentz got to Philadelphia, someone asked him, did you hear from any of your teammates? Did anybody reach out to you? And he said, yeah, I got a text from Zach Ertz. So it's like Zach Ertz is a really good guy. He's a really good young player. And if Sam Bradford's a quarterback, he'll be right behind him and he'll do whatever it takes to try to win with him. But if Bradford's not going to be here and Carson Wentz is, guess what? Zach Ertz is not going to throw his career away out of some kind of solidarity with Sam Bradford. That's not going to happen. It doesn't work that way in the NFL. These guys, their careers are short. They have X amount of time to play. They all want to win. So whoever's there with them and is going to be on their team, they're going to figure that out, and that's who they're going to be supporting. Bradford can still save this. You see players hold out of these kinds of things. Fletcher Cox is holding out of this right now too. I don't think Fletcher Cox shows up for the mandatory camps in June, and he walks into the locker room. It's going to be fine. Nobody's going to be holding that against him, or it's not going to carry over into July and August when training camp gets underway in the preseason. It'll be forgotten by then. And Bradford can do the same thing. He can make it all go away rather quickly if he just shows up the first day of camp, says, I was upset. I wanted to see what we could get done in terms of a trade. It didn't work out. Now I'm here. He doesn't lose any faith, I don't think. His teammates won't hold that against him.
Phil, you wrote an article today about the Eagles resuming their search for a top personnel executive, and the name that's come out is Joe Douglas. Can you give the listeners some information about who Joe Douglas is and why the Eagles are targeting him?
Well, we talked to him apparently last year or the year before. Last year, he had spent a long time with the Baltimore Ravens. He was an area scout for them for a long time. He handled the area from which they took Joe Flacco and Ray Rice. There were some pretty good draft picks for them, so he gets some credit for the Flacco and Ray Rice draft selections by the Ravens. He moved up the chain there a little bit, but kind of hit a wall, I guess, in terms of rising there. And last year, the Eagles were interested in him last year, I guess, at some point, but he ended up going to the Bears. And he was the director of college scouting, and basically was there for only one draft. And that's kind of weird. He was in Baltimore for 15 years and Chicago for 1 year, and maybe his family just wanted to go back to the East Coast. There's a lot of things that could be in the mix there. and these guys are human beings as well as football executives. So that could be all that is. Or it just could be a bad fit. He didn't like it. He didn't really fit in with the Bears, or there was some other problem. And that would make me worry a little bit, because with the Eagles, you have Howie Roseman, who has a long history of kind of butting heads with people and then leaving the organization because they don't want to work with Howie or can't work with Howie anymore. Having a guy that maybe had a bad experience in Chicago come to Philadelphia might not be the best fit in the world. It's interesting to ask him that if and when he gets the job here. But they, there are certain guys that, it's a small league, really, when you get down to it. And, within that circle of people who do this, people kind of know who's good and who isn't. And, if Douglas has built up that kind of reputation as one of the guys that's really good at finding good, talented players, that'll go a long way. We're a year away from everybody raving about how Ed Manowitz is going to be the genius personnel guy behind Chip Kelly. A year later, you don't hear about Ed Manowitz anymore. And now it's going to be, Douglas is going to come there and possibly be the guy. So we'll see. But, it looks like Howie Roseman's still going to be the number one guy. And if he can surround himself with good people and improve his chances of hitting on draft picks, you got to be all for that. And if this guy can help him do that, then it'll be a good move.
Are there any other potential candidates for this personnel executive position?
Nothing's come out, really. I'm losing the name of the guy. I can't remember the name of the guy now that was with the Steelers that they talked to back in February.
Brandon Hunt.
Yeah, Brandon Hunt, yeah. That was the name that came up in February, and it looked like there was interest there at the time. They decided to wait till after the draft, because normally in the NFL, if you're a scout or a personnel executive of any kind, your contract runs in the early May, like it basically runs from draft to draft. So if you have a 3-year contract, it's for the next 3 drafts, basically. So contracts basically expire when the draft ends, so the teams can then, they can hold their personnel people, hold them close until the draft process is over, and then guys have a chance to move. So at that point, the Eagles had a few people they were interested in, didn't really get wowed by any of them. So, so far, Joe Douglas is the first name that's come out since the draft ended, and was reported by Chicago Tribune as a guy that they cover the Bears, and got word that this guy was talking to the Eagles. So I haven't heard any other names as of yet, but and at least one report says this guy, it's his job if he wants it. So if they're striking now, this is the move. That you may not hear any other names. It might just be Joe Douglas, but we've heard other names in the past, and you never know. You never know till the guy signed the contract whether he's going to be the right fit or not.
Talking with Phil Sheridan here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Phil, I wanted to ask you, we haven't talked to you since the NFL draft. It's been a couple of days since the draft ended. Some of the, shall I say, the adrenaline of what happened and didn't happen has settled down. And I wanted to get your reaction to some of the Eagles' picks. Obviously, they had Carson Wentz, but then later in the rounds, they got an offensive lineman. And then they had some guys who people consider some interesting picks, to say the least.
Yeah, they basically decided, they had they traded one of the 5th-round picks, or 6th-round picks. They moved out and got 3 third 7th-round picks. They had 3 7th-round picks. And, they took some guys that had some interesting, background issues, some questions about them. And they'd avoided doing that for the most part over the last decade or so. Going back to Andy Reid and even to the Chip Kelly era, if guys had any kind of, off-the-field trouble or issues, they basically just took them off the draft board. This year, they did not do that. They took the guys that, in some cases, it's unclear whether they're going to be, major problems or they're just kids in college making mistakes kind of things. It's always hard to tell with that kind of stuff, until they actually get to the NFL and you see them, Well, one of the things that worries NFL teams, and it's a perfectly legitimate reason to worry, is when a guy has some immature, problems as a college kid, when he suddenly has money in his pocket as an adult in a new city, he can, easily get into all kinds of new levels of trouble. So it's always, it's easy to just kind of stay away from those guys and just avoid it. But with so few, no 2nd-round pick, 1 3rd-round pick, and no 4th-round pick, Eagles decided, we're going to take a shot on some of these guys, and maybe, they may have some questions about character or off-the-field behavior, but if they can take a couple shots on them. And, in the 7th round, you're very unlikely to get a really great player anyway. So if you get a guy who's a character question mark and he can play and he grows up a little bit and it isn't a problem for you, it's just a way to kind of increase your chances, I guess, of getting a hit that late in the draft. But, basically, this is the Carson Wentz draft, and almost everybody else in it, they may be here for a year or 2 or 3, but it's going to always be about Carson Wentz this draft, and the rest of it is just window dressing, really.
Is there a guy that the Eagles picked in the later rounds? I know a lot of people will point to the Oregon State offensive lineman. I know some people point to Wendell Smallwood of West Virginia. Is there a guy the Eagles did pick that you look at and say, you know what, that makes a lot of sense that he's going to be able to be a guy who can fill a need here?
Yeah, I think Wendell Smallwood is probably the most interesting one of those guys. There was a little run on running backs in the 5th round there, and a couple of the guys the Eagles certainly were looking at, and the other teams were looking at, kind of went back-to-back picks, a few picks in front of them, and they were looking at not having a pick for a while. So I think they just said, all right, let's just take the best running back here. They like Smallwood. Doug Peterson really seemed to like him. And one thing Howie Roseman said I thought was interesting about him was that Deuce Staley, the running backs coach, and Ted Williams, who used to be the running backs coach and now works in the personnel department, both of those guys really liked him a lot. Both of those guys, Deuce was a running back. Ted was a guy that coached Deuce and coached other guys that have come along since, and including Westbrook and LaShawn McCoy. So those guys really liked him. They really seemed to connect with him, and to Roseman, that was a good sign. These are guys who really know running backs, and they really kind of liked what Smallwood looked like to them. The other guy that's kind of interesting to me is one of the 7th round picks, Alex McAllister. He's a kind of not very heavy, but good speed rushing defensive end from Florida. He was one of the guys that has some red flags because he just basically left the Florida. It was unclear whether he was kicked off the Florida team or he quit. But either way, having a guy walk off the team in December raises some eyebrows. But he's a guy that in Jim Schwartz's defense, which is going to be all about the pass rush and getting to the quarterback quickly, if he can be the kind of player that the Eagles project him to be and can be a force off the edge, getting some pressure out there, I think that could end up being a guy that might take him a year or 2 to really get his game up to speed and build up his body a little bit, but he's at least interesting to watch.
We've been talking with Phil Sheridan, ESPN NFL Nation Eagles insider. Phil, before I let you go, I wanted you to give the listeners out there kind of a little picture of what's going on with the Eagles. We know we have their next camp or voluntary workouts on May 17th. What can we expect between now and then?
Probably not much. This personnel move will get done. Probably, hiring a personnel guy that could get done in the next week or so if Joe Douglas ends up being the guy they want and he agrees. After that, they'll be starting to talk to the draft picks, trying to get guys signed to contracts and all that. That used to be a big issue in the NFL in the last few years since the new rules were put in place under the current collective bargaining agreement. Basically the contracts are easily worked out. There's not a whole lot of negotiating to do. So they'll try to get the draft pick signed, that kind of thing. And then, the other thing to kind of watch for, when they get back is, does Sam Bradford come back? Or does he make a statement and say he's not going to be there? Or, does he speak at some point? At some point, someone's going to get Sam Bradford somewhere. You have to go to Oklahoma and drive for a couple of hours to find his house. But at some point, somebody's going to get Sam Bradford to talk a little bit and say exactly what he's thinking, what his plan is. So, if he just kind of quietly just shows up when the OTAs start up again, I wouldn't be shocked by that. It could happen. He could just say, all right, I made my point, and I'm not getting traded. So here's the best. What's the next best thing is just to come, be a good teammate. So I would keep an eye out for that. But otherwise, yeah, it's getting them on the field. A lot of their workouts are closed to the media, so we won't get to see a whole lot. And I won't have a whole lot to report in terms of who looks good and who's doing what, and if anybody's moving around position-wise. That's a little bit frustrating. But eventually in June, the mandatory minicamp will be open to the media, and we'll get a better look at all these guys for the first time. So that'll be the next really big thing.
Be sure to follow him on Twitter at Sheridan Scribe, and all of his articles are at ESPN.com. Phil, appreciate you joining us today.
Yep, anytime, Jeff. Thank you.